Well, that's me. I'm Bob Hockaday, and I grew up in Hawaii and moved to New Mexico. Essentially, my background is in low-energy X-ray physics. And you say, this is odd. So I worked in the National Laboratory for 15 years, worked on a lot of nuclear weapon systems, essentially diagnostics of those weapons. And when the Cold War ended, I said, I should go out and solve what I call the real problems of scarcity. It's water and energy, the two major things. If you have those two things, you can create sustainable agriculture and things like that if you have a sustainable source of energy and water. So you can just about obtain either one of those given essentially enough energy. You can create your water supply, you can process all your material, and the big deal is now pollution can be solved by solving what we call the waste problem in our farming. The purpose of Tucumcari Bio-Energy is to convert manure into fuel. We do this through an anaerobic digestion process. What we're doing is we're going to speed up the process from what normally happens when you let a pile of manure sit out in a field. Normally it would take over a month to digest that with bacteria and convert it to methane and carbon dioxide. What we're going to do is raise that temperature and optimize the process. Speed it up, we're going to add in some cheese whey waste, which actually improves the process, speeds it up and allows us to balance the pH. So what Tucumcari Bio-Energy is really doing is processing waste material from farming and agriculture, converting it to methane, carbon dioxide, sterile fertilizer, and one last thing, cattle bedding. The old ethanol plant in Tucumcari was a grain to alcohol, essentially refinery. It also produced cattle food, which we call distiller's grain. But essentially you grind up sorghum or corn and convert it to flour, which you then mix with water and add yeast, and you now have a fermentation process, which the yeast converts to starch, to sugars, and then eventually to alcohol, which you can then essentially truck out as alcohol fuel for automobiles. And the distiller's grain is a feed for cattle. And what happened, that old plant essentially went bankrupt because the price of grain went up, we went into a drought, and the price of fuel went down, alcohol. The plant is one of the smallest ones in the ethanol industry. It was a prototype for other plants. So it ran from 1980 to 1990. And then there were 2 attempts to rebuild it as a larger plant. And we acquired it a couple of years ago. We are looking for investors who really care about what our product is. And we'd really like community participation. The idea is we want suppliers of our raw material, manure and garbage and things like that, to be interested in delivering it to us at the lowest possible price. We'd like them to be investors, so if we'd all benefit if the company succeeds. We also want the customers, the end customers, to be able to participate. So we'd like these strategic relationships with the company. Now, we're also just interested in investors who really care about reducing pollution and things like that. So this is a way to invest and essentially dramatically reduce pollution and change agriculture in this area. When the Tucumcari Bio-Energy plant is running, it'll take about 20 employees to operate that plant. We're also expecting to attract greenhouse growers. Because we produce carbon dioxide, you want to use that carbon dioxide in greenhouses. By doing that, you now attract greenhouse growers, and there'll be at least more than 20 employees in those greenhouses. So the idea is it starts to become a focus for agricultural activity. And the idea is now you can attract greenhouse growers, you now produce more essentially high-value crops in this area and diversifying the agriculture. A critical detail at the ethanol plant is to have a workforce that can actually operate the plant, understand what's going on, and be able to actually create the new spin-off products that will come out of this. This is actually a chemical processing plant figured out where we're taking bacteria and using them to convert chemicals. Well, there's a variety of materials that will come out. So we will need an educated workforce. So Tucumcari Bio-Energy will be reaching out to the community essentially through science programs and things like that, and also tours of the plant to understand what's going on in the plant. But we really need long-term commitment of the community to be able to support us, which means we need a scientifically educated workforce. Potential spin-offs, I mean, you figure out what we're doing. We're using anaerobic digestion. We're going to optimize it. So you say, the obvious next detail is to start converting other old ethanol plants in the Midwest. We've got about 50 to 60 ethanol plants that are essentially bankrupt. They're too small, they just don't fit, but they could be potentially digesters. And then once we know how to right size the plant, I mean, the new technology that's coming in here is being able to take and make this plant just the right size for a farm or a dairy, so it can be located on the farm. You might say we could get into the franchise business where you actually go to different dairies and farms and put a processing plant right there. Now the rest of it is, now you're making fuel, you're fueling trucks and vehicles. We become an energy consumer of electricity. In the local area, we've got a lot of low-cost electricity that comes from windmills and solar systems. So it turns out this plant could be the essentially focus point for different kind of fueling schemes. We're talking about hydrogen fuel cells, methane fueled trucks, things like that. The other part of this is attracting the greenhouse growers. They need carbon dioxide, so a critical detail is we can provide the carbon dioxide, we can provide the heat and the water for those greenhouse growers. So there's a synergistic relationship between the greenhouse growers and the ethanol, well now digester plant. We'll provide a lot of the essentially infrastructure for running those greenhouses. We might even be able to provide the greenhouses, and we can essentially be the base that you can build on for greenhouse growing. And that would allow agriculture here to be essentially weather resistant. So amazing detail is we actually would be processing 32,000 tons of manure, but we would be capturing the equivalent of about 30,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. So it turns out this is a good thing for the environment. We can actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions with this plant.